Well, this is April the 10th, 1991. I'm Jack Webb, and I'm interviewing Clyde Reynolds at his home in Bastrop. What's the address of this place? Wilson?
Yeah, 1510 Wilson.
1510 Wilson.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful sunshiny day, and the weather's very mild, and green grass and flowers are profuse. So it's had a nice bunch of rain recently. I want to interview Clyde. I think Clyde is probably knows as much about Bastrop County as anybody. As far as I know, he's has it in most of it in his head, and so we're going to try to kind of get a little of that out of him, I guess. But let me start off, Clyde, and if you just, what is your full name, Clyde?
Clyde Martin Reynolds.
Martin. Is that a family
Yeah,
name?
my mother was a Martin.
Martin, I see. And when were you born?
February the 8th, 1912.
February the 8th,
1912.
So that makes you about 79 years old.
79 years old.
And you were born where? Here in
Bastrop, and the bed is still in the house.
That's the old Reynolds residence.
The old Reynolds residence. My daddy was born in the house and died in it. My older brother was born in the house and died in it.
Well, what about your family members? Were there any girls in the family or just boys?
No, there were boys. The one girl was Lula Reynolds, and she married Cleaver Tree.
Oh.
No, Margaret married Cleaver Tree. She married she married Captain Jones. You know, Captain Jones,
Yeah.
that was well kin to the Joneses in Smithfield, the pals down there.
Yeah.
She married him, and Margaret was the only daughter of that union. And she died right after she was born. Her mother died right after she was. Miss Lula seemed to be a very talented person. Jack, in the old obituaries and the old clubs that they had around here that we was run across, she was always entertaining.
Now that's your sister.
No, that was my aunt.
Your aunt?
My aunt on the Reynolds side.
I see.
See, there was 3 boys, Sid, Jake, and Allie, and 2 of those were pharmacists. One of them had a pharmacy in Uncle Allie had a pharmacy in Denison. That was a railroad town, at that time, just starting up there. And Uncle Jake was in Temple. And Uncle Jake married a Maynard. Married Ed Maynard and Pal Maynard's sister.
Okay.
And so they were there. And then Daddy married Daisy Martin from Ron. And the reason that she was here, she came here to visit the Ollises, who is the McCain Ollis in Austin, the same bunch of Ollises. Well, she came here because Mrs. Ollis was a Duncan, and my mother's mother was a Duncan over in East Texas. And the Duncans, the Ollises that were here, are buried out at the cemetery here.
Well, now you of course, the Reynolds family is one that goes back to the Thomas Christian, Mary Christian Burleson.
That's correct. See, Martha.
Tell us about your connection with Mary Christian Burleson there.
Okay, well, the oldest daughter was Martha Christian. And see, she must have been 7, 8 years old when they came down here, maybe 10. And then she later married Sherman Reynolds, who was down into this.
That's Martha.
That's right. Martha, the daughter. See, after all the runaway scrapes, 1835, and I don't know exactly when they married, but she married Reynolds, Sherman Reynolds, and he was a merchant first in LaGrange, in that area, and had lots there even when he died 60 years later. They were in his probate. I didn't realize that. But
You say Sherman Reynolds was from New York.
He was from upstate New York. And there was 3 or 4 of those, and Angeline came through here at one time, a younger brother, and I think there was another one, but I don't have his name. And Angeline was on his way with the gold rush to California from here. And they organized in Bastrop and some of them in Austin and even Fredericksburg at that time. They went on to California, and he established out there and lived out there till he died.
Seek your fortune in the gold field.
That's, I think so.
Did he find some gold, or did he ever?
Well, he made money. He came out there. He was a newspaper man out in that country, and was supposedly around Mariposa, which is due south, really, of San Francisco, about the Yosemite National Park, back in that area somewhere. And he had a lot to do with getting water over there, according to an article that I've read. But as far as I know, he never did come back to this country, even on a visit. But some of the daughters or granddaughters have been in here, and my grandmother used to get letters from them, and my brother used to write to some of the relations in that country when he was here, you know. But lately, in the last 15 years, I haven't heard a word from them. They may drop in any time because they're still out there, I think.
Well, now you were, of course, your grandmother was Green, I believe. And
yeah, my direct grandmother.
And she was the grandmother that lived in the old rental house.
That's right. And was given the house. I think, Jack, she was given that house as when Mr. Green said they needed a house, so he got a house from her. It was really her house, in a way. And a lot of the furniture, some of the furniture in there was the Green furniture that came with it.
And of course, the old house, you still own the old house.
We still have it and had it restored.
Yeah.
And the Prokops now, who naturally are my wife, Dula Bell's grandson that lives in the house, she didn't rent it. And the boys, was four of us, and 4 boys, and there's 4 kids now, 2 girls and a boy. But that's the first time a girl had been living there as a family member of the houses, so both of them way back.
Well, now, your father's name was what?
Sid Reynolds.
Sid.
Sid Reynolds.
And then you had a brother named Sid, and one named Rusty.
That's right, and Clyde.
And the one Dallas.
Off was between Arthur was his name. We couldn't say Arthur, so we called him Arthur. He accepted that.
There was 4 brothers.
4 brothers.
Yeah.
And there were some girls that died at childbirth or with whooping cough right after childbirth. They're buried in the cemetery here.
Well, now your father was...
They were the oldest, too, of the whole bunch. Yeah, they were the oldest of the children.
Now, your father, he was in the Liberty Stable business.
Well, it's a stable family tradition, you know. Now, Reynolds had a store here. Reynolds Merchandise on Main Street, and had a big one. And Jack, if you go by the pattern of the censuses, he was the first man that had the census. The first name to appear on the 1850 census. Mr. Nichols was the first one to pay on the 1860 census. And he was the first one, and we have his certificate where he was commissioned that by the Census Bureau or whoever it was. Now, I never have inquired about the first one. Probably didn't have one. But Reynolds' name appeared on the first one listed in his family, right after, listed the kids. In 1850, it could have been that the fellow stopped at his store first on Main Street, or you might have been staying in the big house that I have a picture of there. You want me to bring a picture of that house?
Well,
okay. Oh, well, the picture of that, because that's where Mary Christian died. So anyhow, there could have been one or two of those things. If he wasn't a census taker, that might have been the answer to why his was listed first.
Well, now you were mentioning that livery stables rented horses and pigs.
Yeah, that's just what it meant.
Yeah,
That they were part of delivery. They boarded horses, and they leased a surrey and a horse, and they would meet the trains as a taxi does now. And we have pictures of that. We have a picture at the depot with 2 rigs there. Now, one of them was Reynolds, and the other one might have been Morris, the competition. And they met the trains at night. And they also served the undertakers as pulling the hearses.
Oh.
The undertaker owned the hearse, but the teams were furnished by the livery stables most of the time. Now, that's what I've been told. Was, and they performed in parades. You see them using automobiles now?
Yeah.
But at that time, they had teams. We have pictures of that.
Well,
And some of those teams were were from the different livery stables, more than likely, because they were used to noises and they were used to towns and everything, and you didn't bring a wild horse in hooking up to a parade on Main Street. So they used a horse that was familiar with those streets, I'm sure of that. And the driver went with the horses.
Now, if somebody familiar with them.
That's right. Now, if you go to the country, I've heard them say that if they went to the country and you went, they didn't like to let you take a horse in a gig. You had to take a driver too. But sometimes they would let them run them the other way. And
Well,
that was
when the horses went out in the livery stables, your folks never went into the garage business or any modern.
No, it wasn't a garage, but Reynolds, when Sherman Reynolds died, he talked of a wagon yard. So they had wagon repair places and yards where they sold them, I'm sure, Jack. And the old records that I found here, they'll talk about a wagon yard. And of course, wagon yards where they stayed overnight too. But at this business, they had wagon yards and places where they displayed buggies and wagons and sold them. And that's listed in his will.
The wagon yard.
The wagon yard, because he had the back end of it. But he said at that time, I believe, that the wagon yard part was separate and apart, that belonged to Reynolds and Buchanan, or Mr. Buchanan by himself. Because they were kind of partners later on. Mr. Buchanan came in here, 20 years later, probably. And
Now, you mentioned earlier of having one of the Miltons in McDade having some sort of a transport service.
Yeah, the old
San Antonio.
newspapers show that from San Antonio to from McDade to San Antonio. See, that was probably before they got into Austin, and the railroad ran down from Austin to San Antonio. See?
Well, now, what was the railroad at McDade at that time?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the reason they had it. See, because they bring freight into McDade much before they got to Austin even. And that might have been that period of time. I never have put it on the map to tell about it. But there was an advertisement in the 1850 census, 1850 newspaper, where Milton had services from McDade to San Antonio.
So, of course, that would be wagon.
Oh, wagon train, that's right. But they had some produce over there probably, and it would come there. The first shipping, we have found things here. The other day a fellow was repairing a wall in an old building downtown, wooden ceiling in it, or siding on the side of it. The wall, the first wall was that, and it had the sign on it says Bastrop via McDade. So you can establish the time that they were delivering over here and when the railroad was there and it wasn't here. But it used to come that way. All the products would be shipped to McDade and to Bastrop via McDade. And that's
McDade was really on the map then.
Well, sure, it was printed that way. That's absolutely right. And that's probably what established the road from McDade to Smithfield. Now, I've never got that down, but there was a McDade to Smithfield road. Now, Smithfield was much later. Oh, no, it went across country.
Oh.
See, it went down and came out, but it went from McDade to Smithfield. Now, some of the people have tried to connect it with they called it the old potato road. Well, the potato road got its name now, in my opinion, over there, because they had good potatoes there and they would take them to Smithfield and sell them. And they said that they did that to put them on the rail. Well, that was uncalled for, because why they had a road going into Austin then, and Austin to San Antonio. Now, if they would have brought them through here, that's what they'd be hauling. They'd be hauling those potatoes if they made them that early. But this is the old potato road that we refer to over there is the McDade Smithfield Road. And it's pretty well, you can still travel it. Get on it, you have to get off of it some, and then you travel it again, and then you get off again. It went in about where the old road used to go in the Smithfield Lane there from Bastrop. They came in on top of that hill. They really went through the pines where that science place is now, and right through the middle.
Of course, you can't go through there now, can you?
Yeah, you could walk it, but as the fences came on, that closed it all up. But it's still open. You could tell it is a road and recognize it as a road till they begin to fence it. But I would say some of that cancer thing that's down in Smithfield is built right on that road, real close to it, in the Pine Hills, before it got to 70.
Well, now, your father, of course, was in the livery stable business. You don't remember that as a boy.
No,
He was a farmer, I believe, when your memory started.
The three Green boys. Well, let me get back to Grandpa Green.
Yeah.
He's the one that started maybe the electricity here, or had money. See, when you had money, they could do a lot. And he brought his slaves with him. And another thing was the story that I never did hear my grandmother said it. Maybe she said it and I didn't really remember it. But they were coming with their slaves and they stopped over at Lexington. The way they came in at a later date, Jack, say in the 40s or something like that, or maybe the 50s, Lexington seems to be a place of stopping. That they came a direction down this way and then over here. Now, I don't know why it wasn't mentioned, or maybe it wasn't there. If it was something else. But they had stopped there, and I think some of them might have stayed over there. They knew somebody because my grandmother used to go back there and visit. But when they stopped there for a week or two, they had some things, and they were looking for more Indians down this way. And they told, the story was that they had, say, 6 cans of lard, and Mr. Green, Grandpa Green said, well, the women know how to take care of the money, so I'll give it to her to take care of it. And she put a coin in each bucket of lard.
That's to hide it.
To hide it. If the Indians attacked them, well, that was what they used in coming through the Indian country, or wherever they were, from Lexington this way, or even farther back even more. But that was a story that was handled down from the Green, the only one I've ever heard. But it's logical. Now I have the Green Bible now. I have the old Bible from way back there.
Now you were kind of a favorite grandchild of your grandmother Green, weren't you?
Yeah. Now this Green Bible. Oh yeah, I was the youngest, well, one of the twins, and I used to go to town with her. And she kind of took over one, and Mother took one. Because when we were born, my mother had to go to Scott and White in Austin. I mean, that was King Daughters then. In Temple, on the train. She was in bad shape. We wasn't delivered there. We were delivered here, but Dr. Lucky put her on the train, and she went up there, made it and came back. If you can imagine riding a train to Austin after childbirth. And then they raised us here.
Well, now, you talking about Rusty. Rusty was your twin.
That's right, my twin brother.
Of course, y'all weren't identical twins.
Oh, no. And I'm supposed to have been 30 minutes older than he.
Oh, you were the oldest brother.
Yeah, that's what they told me. That's what I've always heard.
Well, now, Hoppy's older than you.
Yeah, he's 3 years older, and brother was 6 years older than that. And the 2 girls that died, his babies, were the oldest ones in the family.
Well, now, do you remember living on the farm?
No, I never did live on the farm. Hop did.
Hop did.
They lived out in a house on the farm.
Yeah.
But
this is the only home you remember.
I only home that I remember. And that home was bought by Mr. Green for the daughter. See, the daughter that was.
And of course, in later years, much later years, you had a dairy there, right?
Yeah, we had a dairy there starting in the Depression years, in about 1929. And we milked cows. We had always had some cows. Ever since I can remember, we had horses and cows in town right here. We'd milk 1 cow, and then 2 cows, and then 3 cows. And after a while, well then, it just would grow into something. And that's what it did. And we milked them in town, walked them to pastures out the edge of town, and back and forth every day. And then had milking machines too later on.
Oh, you got in both,
oh, yeah.
both the ways of life.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hand milking
and hand milking, and the other 2 when Deal allowed milk came.
Well, does that involve your father?
Yeah, he was the one that did it, just my father.
Yeah, but now you boys helped out.
Oh yeah, well that was one reason I stayed here. Stayed in high school so long, we stayed back because I was having run in the dairies.
Now, what do you mean stayed in high school so long?
Oh, well, you know, back in a few days and right at the Depression of June, about the start of the Depression, you couldn't do anything anywhere. It wasn't anything for kids. That was when they had CCC camps and all of that stuff, Jack. And so we stayed around here an extra year or two and before I went to
You
NN.
might have been playing a little baseball.
Now, we could play football an extra year or two. Well, my baseball playing came really a little bit later. And I played a lot, but that was out at picnics and things of that kind with the older group. But the baseball came after I played baseball over there, and while I was there. But we milked and sold milk 10 cents a quart, put on your doorstep twice a day if you want. Now it's $1 a quart.
10
You
cents
can
a
imagine,
quart.
10 cents a quart.
On your doorstep.
Yeah, you've done that when you were
Yep,
when you were
Richard
doing
Green
it. No,
used
that's
to
right.
sell.
For
That's
Richard
right.
Green. We were in the business when he was there too. See, we were gonna, well, and then the war put us out, which was good because folks were getting older. And I went to NN, see, and when it did, they couldn't fight. The Army camp came in and took the ground, and we had least. We didn't own any country.
Well, now, do you recall any of your early school days? I guess you went to school here at
Oh, yeah,
Bastrop.
we lived across the street from a schoolhouse always. See, that schoolhouse was built. The old home place and the schoolhouse will be 100 years old in 1894, side by side, if the schoolhouse. The property of the schoolhouse, that's the third schoolhouse, I believe, that's there now.
Yep.
But there will be, that spot is the first public school in Bastrop. That time, before that, the Germans went to the German school down at the old casino, which was on the same street, on Farm Street, but across the railroad track, and they had a good one. And then the public school started in the farm lot across the school.
German school, I
The
didn't know
German,
there
oh
was.
yeah, they had one here and had a good one. And it was entertainment
German
center.
kids that learned.
German kids went to the school there.
I didn't
And
know
we had
there
a
was that
lot of
many
Germans.
Germans down
Oh,
here.
we had a lot of them. The Hasslers and the Briggers. And see, old man Hassler had 6 or 7 kids, and as they came on up, well, they all had families, Jack. And they were married, and then they all had 4 or 5 kids. Walter, Joe. Joe didn't have any, but Ernest and all of them. And they all had kids, and they went to school. There was a big German family in here.
And it's kind of a private school, is that?
It was private. They had it their own place. It was an entertainment center too, because they had dances there. I used to hear my daddy talk about they'd go down and watch the Germans dance. Had good orchestras and all.
Wasn't the Sons of Herman or anything?
No, no, it was their own outfit, and it's a good index there now where the Germans had it. The index, they bought this ground and what they call some of the names of some of it. And I was looking at it the other day, and I want to give it to one of the Hassler heirs that I'm working with now, because she needs this. Because Mr. Hassler, a big merchant here, but he was from Switzerland, and but he married a German. Well, she married a Hoppy who was from Germany, and that's the one that she's working on. And they were Catholics. That bunch were Catholics. Later, a lot of them got into the Episcopal Church.
Well, now I guess, were you a Methodist all along?
Yeah, my grandmother was a Methodist.
That's
Came here
Grandmother Green?
brought the Methodists with them. And the Greens were too, to my knowledge, because they both have windows in the Methodist Church. I guess I'm connected with 3 or 4 windows down in the Methodist Church, Jack, you know, one way or another. Like Martha Christian Reynolds. And
So you went to Sunday school in church at the Methodist Church then?
Oh, yeah.
Growing up then?
Oh yes, well she was Grandma Christian was the founder of the Methodist Church here in 1835, as we say. See, that's reading your bishop is Smith from Elgin, see, because they were the same one. She's the one that we were with, the Smiths.
Well, do you remember what kind of a school that you started? I guess they had, pot-bellied stoves and...
Yeah, we had a brick building, had a nice building time. I got there.
Did each grade have its own room? Or?
Just about. As I was coming up, they had to double them up. A little before that, See, we started to school in about 9th grade, so that'd be about 1990, about the wartime, see, World War One.
So when did athletics start coming into your school?
It wasn't very long after that because my brother was playing, and we have pictures of them playing a little football.
Now Rusty was quite a football player.
Yeah, that was my twin brother later on.
Yeah.
And Hop was a good football player. He was captain of the team here. One of the captains, I think they had two. He played center, and he played, well, he got over to A&M, and he was in the class of 30 there, so it must have been about 25 or 26 that he was a freshman. 26, 27. Yeah, 26, he was a freshman. And he was captain of the football team. And they had some good football teams.
Here at Bastrop.
Yeah, at Bastrop. He was a yell leader at A&M, and then 29 and 30, he was a yell leader. It's ironic now, Jack, that we have a yell leader there that's a black boy from Bastrop.
From Bastrop?
Yeah, just in the paper this week.
Okay.
One of the McDonald's, I believe.
Oh, well,
Yeah, so this is, while I'm here, I'll tell you about that. They want some old things at our next A&M meeting, and I'm going to try to take his picture down
Now you're a member of the
there. A&M Club.
A&M Club.
When I go. They have it here now where I can go. Sometimes I can't go.
You got quite a few A&M folks
Good
here
many
at
of them.
Bastrop.
And they want all the old stuff they can get. Like I have a blanket there, a tea blanket that I got lettering for baseball. They don't make those anymore. They've discontinued. And I got the pennant where we beat Texas that year and won the conference, and things of that kind.
Yeah.
And the other awards that we got for winning the conference, that we just didn't do it because Uncle Billy Dish used to win them all the time. But it was very odd, so the fact that we won them, whether 1 out of 20 a year or 1 out of 15, it does make it a little bit different. And this was the second time, I believe, that we won it. And we won it in 19, must have been in 34, just about. About that year, so we happened to win the conference. They didn't have, I mean, that was the Depression years or right after it. And we only had 4 teams playing baseball, A&M and Baylor and TCU and Texas.
Is that right?
That was all played.
Mm-hmm.
So we went into the East Texas Oil Field and played some in Henderson Junior College, and when we used to go to Beaumont and Galveston and play ball, but when they were in the Texas League, and play them in the spring, you know. It was a ball game for us, and we'd go down there and get to play them. We'd stay to play 2 days, Friday and Saturday. Gave them something to play too, because they didn't have any ball teams to play when they were in spring training before the league started. So that was an experience that they don't have today. That we had.
So you had quite a bit of athletic experience in.
Yeah, not long. And I played football and basketball in high school, of course, and we all had a track part at that time too, for the county meets, because county meets used to be the big thing.
Track
all
meet.
over the county, the track meets.
Well, then,
We've got to
you
revive
played, what do you call it, town ball or?
Oh, yeah, semi-pro ball.
Semi-pro, yeah.
Yeah, with all these teams. Smithfield, played with Smithfield just off and on. Much in Elgin, when Clopton used to have the good teams out at the Brickyard.
Yeah.
Well, I played there with him quite a bit. And then when we won the cup race, I played with him. So I guess I played ball around Elgin probably almost as much semi-pro ball as I did anywhere.
Well, now the Hibbs bunch was.
I played
coming
with
along
them,
back
played
then.
with them and played against them. We used to go out to Barton Hill and play them during the week. And they were hard to beat, and I'd play with them when they'd come to Elgin. But I played with Bigfoot Lewis and all that bunch up at Elgin. Not with him, but against them. That's when they was playing with the team out of Austin. They used to come down. But I played with the Sellers boys, Joe and the youngest one.
Steve.
No, Steve was older. Joe and Steve were older, but Joe and, the last one. What was
John.
it? No, John was older too. John and Steve were older boys, and they were away from home then. But Joe and
Of course, Sam was the youngest, I think. He was the boy
Joe.
with a crippled arm.
boy, he was, and I didn't know him.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't play ball. But the other one that was there and playing, he was a little bit younger than I was. He was a good ball player. I think of it. And then I played with the Bakers quite a bit too.
Otto
Otto
Howell.
Halman's out when he was playing in some of those leagues around. Well, I would go and play with Otto.
Well, that was a pretty serious business. That is, there was lots of heat generated in ball games, wasn't
That
it?
sure was, and we used to go out to all the country picnics and play, Jack. Most of the little communities had a baseball team or get one together to play somebody that day for entertainment at a picnic, like Red Rock or Cedar Creek, Oak Hill, and maybe Mag Day.
You didn't have to be from Oak Hill to play for Oak Hill.
Oh no, you could play. And they had some good ball players around Mac Day, like Strong boys, you know, Bob Strong and Fuzzy Strong, and then a whole lot of the others that were around. They were good ball players. They all those communities had. And of course, Dick Whitworth was from Mac Day at one time too, you know, who was in the Texas League right at the first. And when Austin Association was playing, I saw him play with Austin Association. Of course, Dick was a railroad man, but he played professional baseball in those little leagues. And he
remember Charlie Carter?
No, he was before my day. Yeah, he was before my day.
He played in the
had
Texas League.
That's right.
He was quite a pitcher, I understand.
Yeah, Charlie Carter, and Elgin had some good ball players. Bastrop used to have some of those balls. Bastrop used to hire some. They would hire 3 boys, and they could all pitch, catch, and play first base. And they played all the time, see. But if they wasn't playing one position, they'd play another. And they'd go with Giddings and play. They'd go to Elgin, ride the train to Elgin over to Giddings, and they bet big money. Mr. Leon Wesley used to tell me that he was the bookkeeper. He didn't know much about baseball, but he was a good bookkeeper. He'd go with them everywhere, and he liked the game, of course. And he did all the betting for them. He carried the bet money.
Well,
they bet money. That's the way they did.
Bet on themselves.
Oh yes, the team was playing. They bet on themselves. That was part of the game. When they went out of town, they used to play Elgin all the time, and Smithfield. Of course, they could go in buggies to Smithfield. And that was a long time ago.
You were really serious when you were playing out there.
Out then, at that time.
Yeah.
At that time, see. Because they had money up, but of course, the only money that I remember much betting going on with us is we'd go out to the coal mines and play the Latin Americans. When the coal mines came in here and the Mexican teams there, we had some Benevas boys. They went to our school, at a public school here, and were good boys, and they were Latins from Italy more than him. Their mother was from Italy. And but his daddy was running these mines out here for some of them for Phelan or somebody from San Antonio. And they would come in here, and the boys out there wouldn't play unless they bet. So we'd go out and play, and that was kind of later on, and later when we were playing, and we didn't. We'd just play on the weekends or Saturday, maybe, not Sunday.
Well, really, that was the principal entertainment, wasn't it?
For many years, and all, and sometimes they'd have them on the, it was good for communities, and then the communities spread out so much, they lost them, and they would be, like we'd use them from Red Rock and Smithfield, Red Rock, Cedar Creek, and the Hips boys up from out around Weberville, you know, they were all for good ball players, both of them. And they used to come to Bastrop and play too, before my time. And at my time too.
Well, Sonny Hankey, wasn't he about...
Sonny we were together. Sonny and I played together. Holland Brown was always ours, from Elgin. He was Lansing Clopton's right-hand man. He was the scorekeeper all the time, and he see that they had water and they had balls and had everything. And Mr. Holland Brown was, he's about Wallace's age.
Yes.
And, but he was always one that Mr. Clopton could always depend on, always. Now, I remember going to Pflugerville one time to play when we were in the cup race. And at one time they organized a cup race, and Weldon Hart used to run it. Yeah. He's the one that brought it up, started it. Out of Austin, One of the greatest things that happened in my time in Central Texas for baseball teams was that. And they'd have them all over this area, and that happened 3 or 4 years. And we'd go up there, and you'd have to play during the week in the playoff, and we'd go to Richland up there to play, and there was a gin right by it. And if they'd get a good hit or a wrong run, they'd blow that gin whistle. And we rode it. They didn't have many automobiles, and they had a load of corn going up that way somewhere. Clockton did or somebody. So Honey Schaefer from here was with me, and maybe 1 or 2 more. When we went up and played with Elgin that time, we rode the top of that corn truck up there. And that was about 15, 20 miles back on New Sweden, you know. That was Richmond we went to. But those kind of things, but it was all due time and due place. Well, we contributed a lot of entertainment for people everywhere, Jack. It was worth our time and place.
Well, it was a good, healthy form of entertainment.
Yes, and you made a lot of friends as you went along, and those people were with us till we died. I found that out when I was running for election. That's what I contribute to me running pretty strong to start with, in Elgin, and that and others too, as you know. But the baseball that I started with there was a big help.
I never did remember whether you had any opposition or not. Did you ever have anybody run against you?
Oh, yes, I did. Vernon Eskew when I run around the first time.
First time, yeah.
That's right.
But after the first time, you never had any opposition?
Oh, no. See, Vernon, you know, was district clerk, and he decided to run for that. Because it was a better paid job.
But you and Tig Jones are one of the few that left undefeated, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Might have been at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they used to be contested for it. Okay.
Well, now, going back into older times, I guess, when you were brought up there at the home, you must have had some chores, did you?
Oh, yeah, we milked and brought in wood and things like that all the time. We always had plenty to do. Like my grandmother would pay us so much a week, maybe 15 cents a week or something to get wood for her. Up in her room, we stacked it out in the hall.
Now, your grandmother lived in that same house?
Oh, she lived in that house with us. Yeah. And I seemed to be her favorite, more or less. And so she would go to town. I remember in World War I, she bought us some war bonds, Dan and I. And I went to town with her, and we'd stop at Grandma Jones, who lived just one block down. Grandma Jones was the Joneses out of Smithfield, later. Were from down there in that country, and they moved up here. Mrs. Powell, Mrs. Dr. Powell was a Jones, and that was her. That was her mother.
Well, now, you remember your first job that you worked for, pay off? I mean, that was for somebody else. Of course, around the family, I guess you got a little paid, maybe like you say, for chores. But did you when you in high school? Did you work for anybody else, or was it all?
No, I guess the first thing I did was help the boys down at the gin load cotton seed. They'd blow it out in those cars, and we had to throw it to the back end. And I guess that was the first money-making job that I know of, unless it was picking cotton for a while.
Did you just pick much cotton?
No, I couldn't stand that back. It got me in the back, so I didn't pick much cotton. Cotton picking wasn't my game.
You picked maybe 150 or so pounds.
Yeah, that's right, maybe 100 pounds and all. But I couldn't. The picking wasn't for me. I could do other things.
Well, now the shoveling that cotton seed wasn't.
Well, no, that's right. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't so bad. What we would do is throw it to the back end because they didn't have blowers that went back there. Mm-hmm. Nowadays they have blowers that would take it back there. And I would work around those cotton seed things for 2 or 3 summers.
What was the weight? Of course, you may not remember the weight, but
little over 100 pounds. When I played football, I weighed about a little over 100 pounds. I was real small, but I could play in maybe. And if you didn't have to block, if we had to block a big tackle, we had somebody helping us. But I could catch passes pretty good, and run pretty good, see. And that was always the thing.
And Dan
he was a different. He was a guard, and a big end too.
He was bigger than you
Oh
were.
yeah, much larger.
Did y'all ever get in any family scraps?
No, we never did that we know of, that I know
Y'all
either
were
way.
peaceful.
of. Yeah, that's right, more or less.
Well, doctors in the community, I remember reading
Well,
Dr. Bryson's book,
Yes.
or he had a couple of books, I guess, and they were real interesting. He was kind of a frontier almost. He was in on the early doctrine here.
No, the
wasn't he?
doctor in here was lucky. Lived right over there on the corner, over on Church Street. That's his house. It's over there now. He delivered all the babies here before Bryson came in.
Yeah.
Much before Bryson. He delivered all of us, the four of us.
Lucky,
and the
Dr.
Christians
Lucky.
and the Christians and the daughters that died too. Yeah, Dr. Lucky delivered them all.
Well, the doctor would just come to your house if
Well,
you
yeah.
needed an operation or treatment. He'd just come to your house.
That's where he did it all. That's the only place he had. And he made the operating room right there.
He had a portable operating table,
If he did,
or on
if
the
he
dining
needed
room
one.
table.
If he needed one, that's right. More or less. Of course, it was plenty of room over there, but in that house. But of course, that house is acted as Mrs. Mary Osmond was born in that house too, and there's been funerals out of that house, 2 or 3 of them.
Well, now, you remember going to the dentist when you were a boy? Did you
No.
have a...
Oh no, it was much later when I went to dentist. When maybe I got in high school. Dr. Fowler was the dentist here then. He was a kid.
About all dentists did was to pull teeth. I
Pull
guess.
teeth and no, they filled them a little bit. Dentists, they had machines by the time I went to them.
I remember when, even a few years later, I guess, in what you were experiencing, they had the hand crank, or foot crank, I
Yeah.
guess it was.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they had the foot type.
Drill.
Yeah, they had that, the foot type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now you were, of course, got interested in sports in high school and played football, and then you got interested in baseball.
Yeah.
Was Daniel, was he a baseball player?
No, he was a football player strictly. Of course, he played an extra year in high school after I left him, and he was playing before I started. As a kid, so he got in.
He must have been about 19 years old then.
4 years good, and then he went over to Allen Academy.
And he was, didn't he coach you down in the
Yeah, he stayed there and coached there.
Yeah.
And then stayed there and would operate some of the things on the campus for Mr. Apple. So he was around Brown for, well, I guess 5 or 6 years, in and out.
What about going to A&M? You went down there and when did you get out of A&M?
I graduated in 35.
So you must have gone down about 31.
That's Depression years, that's right. We
You
were
and
there.
Dale Sanders are about the same age, and he
Yeah.
graduated in 31, I believe, from high school.
31.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that'd be about right.
And of course, it was all cadet then, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Everybody was military?
When we started it was. The time I finished it wasn't.
Oh, is that
Because the
right?
government began to get broke too. And they didn't want everybody. They began to select their people later. You didn't have to take it. When I was at the first, you had to take it all 4 years.
Mhm.
I think that was right. But when I was there, you had to take 2 years. After that, it was optional. The government would give you contracts for advancing to be military people,
Mhm.
but maybe that was the change, and they didn't do it. But 2 years was required back in some of that period. And but I just took it 2 years. I wasn't interested in the military as a livelihood for myself. And Hop didn't either. He just took it 2 years. So that was that before that.
Well, now,
They were in the Corps. You could stay in the Corps and stay in the dormitories. That is, the Corps was we marched to meals. You marched to meals
if
every
you weren't in the
time.
Corps, where did you stay?
You stayed off the campus.
Off campus.
At that time.
Yeah.
They didn't have on in-campus things unless, well, they had some there, but that was cripples and people that couldn't qualify at all for military.
So now you
And older people.
played baseball. Did you
Yeah, I
play any
played
other
baseball.
sport down at A&M?
That was all.
Just baseball. Well, that was enough, I guess.
Well, by that time they were, they were have some boys hired, not hired, but given things to come to play with them, Jack. They were on a scholarship, you might say, whatever that might be.
You
Maybe
didn't
they
have
paid
a
the room-
scholarship.
Oh, no. Maybe they paid room and board. It was, back in those days, that was the Depression, you know, and nobody had any money. And so you just couldn't, it was a lot different.
I remember Reagan Brown. You remember Reagan Brown? Reagan was telling about, he was about my generation, but after yours, or little later than yours. But he was telling about working in the animal department down there as a student. He worked there for some of his tuition or whatever.
Well,
And during one winter, he said that they had a snow that came down there, and one of the bright boys decided that snow and milk and vanilla extract would make a good ice cream. So they snuck over to the dairy and milked some of the cows, and they got enough milk to where it was throw their estimate of production off and caused some kind of concern.
was that?
Because they snuck over and they made ice cream out of it.
Yeah.
And of course, he said that the commandant, they called him and called him up before the commandant, and they thought that the end was near, but it worked out to where the commandant, when they explained that, that the snow and the milk and the vanilla flavoring made good ice cream, well, he just dismissed it and let them off. But A&M was, it was pretty strict, wasn't it? It had to be, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were pretty strict. They had to hold the line, you know, that's on any of them.
Yeah.
In any of them. And we were out there by ourselves, and really the only thing involved mostly was like those chicken houses, or which you'd go out and get fried-sized chickens or something, you know, sometimes. I never did, but some of them did.
Some of them did.
And then the ice cream things that you would have, because they were out in the country and nobody involved except the few people that lived on the campus, and they didn't fool with those. You know, the professors that lived there,
Yeah.
and there wasn't any people living there, no civilians much.
College Station was just a train stop then, wasn't it?
More or less, that's about all.
Well, now, you were fire chief here for a number of years, weren't you, in Bastrop?
Yeah, I was with the fire department for many years, I guess.
I know in Elgin, the fire department had a whole lot to do with lots of civic benefits, and then it was you took quite a bit of pride in being a member of the fire department. You had kind of a club or a fraternal kind of thing.
That's right, through a work detail. It was something you were contributing to your community. And we made insurance cheaper for them. If you had a good fire department, they got credit for it, and that made the good credit on the insurance rates.
Well, you didn't get any pay, but I think you got some insurance, didn't you?
No, some of them used to get paid if the pay was there, was so much a call. So much. We never did get paid here much. We didn't use that. But it was always a good contribution that you could make. And so we did. I was with them for many years here.
You were fire chief for years there.
For
Little League ballpark with one of your projects?
Yeah, the assistant under Mr. Milton. Mr. Milton then, he was an older person, was a fire marshal. And then he was the chief for a long time too. He and I worked real close together. That was Dude Milton from Elgin. Mm-hmm. His daddy was the merchant out there, you know.
Yeah.
And all that. And they used to have dances here to promote things. But the fire department was something good. Started here in 1890, about 1890 something. And that was when they put the water system.
They had what?
That's when they
hand carts, or
they put the water system in 1890 at that time. They had not a hand one, but they had might have had a hand one too, a real old one. But what they used to do when they put their fire hydrants in, Jack, and there's one still left in town. We've got them to leave that here. There was 3 on Main Street. One down at the post office, one where the highway used to cross in the middle there, and on Chestnut Street where that was. The other one was up at Farm Street. And then if you wanted a fire hydrant put up around your house for $250, they'd put it in. That was when they had the water system put in, and they had a standpipe about 60 or 70, 80 feet high to get your pressure up with.
Well, I was talking recently to Dr. Gerwitz here at Bastrop. He's on the city council, and I think that they're anticipating having a water supply here again at the river, aren't they?
Well, Bastrop has always had trouble with supply, but they go right back to the same place. I hate to say it, but those fools are drilling wells back here now that they were drilled 70 years ago.
But evidently some encouragement. He was saying that.
Well, it's right on the river.
Yeah.
And of course they had an ocean of water out in Camp Swift and didn't know how to use it.
Yeah.
You'll never make me believe that Camp Swift wasn't built here partly with the water supply they had. They had oceans of water there. It's still out there, but it's been cut off or fouled up. And there's a whole lot I could tell you about that, but I won't do it at this time. And it would be my opinion, of course, but that I could tell you and we could prove on it.
Well, now you were working in the tax office. That kind of got you started in the tax collecting business, wasn't it? Weren't you working in the tax office?
No, I went to work there after the war. When I got back from the service.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I got back, well, they were wanting somebody to help them a little bit. Some of them that were there were pretty old. That's when we made tax rolls by hand, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to work for Mr. Jones. You help him assess. Mr. Watterson was getting pretty old, so I helped him here. Jones did his stuff in his own in Smithfield, and he went to Elgin, you know, when he'd go up there and stand on the corner. And then maybe Mr. Watterson used to take this out here. He'd do Cedar Creek, Red Rock, and Bastrop.
They used to do that on horseback.
They used to go cross country. Of course, in my business, huh?
Keep talking. I want to just get up.
The old record, the old things, you know, Sherman Reynolds was a tax assessor collector, Jack. He had something to do with the county tax office, and so did A.B. Reynolds, Allie Reynolds, my grandfather. Did you know that?
No.
Well, both of them are listed in the old records. I don't have that record here, but they're listed either. That was when the tax assessor collector's office was separate. They might have been assessors and collectors, and I don't think Allie was ever A.B. Reynolds. My grandfather was ever a collector, but Sherman Reynolds was, I think, collector at one time, and assessor too, probably. And you know, I still have his old storybook here, his accounts way back there.
I bet you got some delinquent accounts there too, don't you?
Well, it probably is, but he used to ship cotton for him out of here. And there were old marks in that book there. The marks that he put on them when he shipped them to Galveston. For Higgins and some of them, it says so many bales. It's right there in that book. I'll show it to you after a while. But I have the count when he was in the store here.
Well, now, when you became tax collector, when was that? What year was that?
Well, let's see. I got out, I guess, when was the war over?
45 was the war was over.
Well, that was been, didn't we stay there one more year or something? Well, I guess it was 46 I went to work there.
And then you were tax collector, though, when
Yeah,
about 50?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, about that time when I was elected.
Of course, the tax collector, when you were in there, he did the collecting and the assessing.
That's correct. We handled both of them at that time. And I was doing handing the assessing in for many years for the collectors at that time. Not for Mr. Jones, but for the next ones that followed.
Well, I remember coming to Bastrop with my father, who had court cases and one thing and another, and we'd go down to the restaurant there close to the river. What was it, Riverfront? Or
no, it was a Bridge Cafe.
Bridge Cafe.
Yeah,
Bridge Cafe.
Yeah, and it was developed here during the wartime. The war brought that on.
I see.
Mr. Ott was down at Spring Prairie, came up here and opened that place up and had a good business there. They were from Spring Prairie people, but the wartime is what made that cafe. That wasn't.
Of course, the old hotel over by the courthouse, that was
That was an old hotel.
That was an old place, and did they have meals over there? Or
They
not?
used to have meals at one time. There was a hotel there for a long time. Of course, the old hotels in Bastrop was where the fire station is now on Chestnut Street. Do you know that was the old Turner Hotel? Do you know, Jack, that Turner Hotel, there's a deed on record at this time, same time too, was traded for about 160 acres of ground out here where T.C. Steiner Ranch is now. The Turners traded, who was it they traded? Traded for that place, traded places at that time. A farm up on Wellbarger Creek in the Colorado River traded for a hotel here. In those days, you know, they had a place in the back where the drummers would come in and display all their goods. You knew that. They'd come in here with their shoes.
Cleveland Inn, they had something like that.
Oh, well, they had it here. They had two of them, a different one in Bastrop too. Used to be one down below the fire station. But the old, this old hotel was there.
Well, kind of think back when you were growing up. What was Saturday downtown? What went on downtown?
Saturday downtown was when the colored people would come in and they did all their trading on Saturday.
Everybody came to town.
Everybody came to town, yeah. But that was when that was payday.
Mm-hmm.
See, if they worked that week, well, they'd come in and you'd have a lot of the colored to come in and they had a lot of good credit there. They had somebody standing for them because most of them were doing credit business at that time.
I guess they had meat market. Was it barbecuing in that day?
Oh yeah, they were running, well, sausage mostly. Barbecue came along a little later.
Yeah.
But they'd have a lot of sausage. But in those days, you'd buy 25 cents worth of cheese and crackers, sardines.
Go to the grocery store.
You got it from a grocery store, and then you'd get a soda water for a nickel. And we used to sell soda water on Main Street for a nickel out of a tub every Saturday.
Oh, you made it
some Saturday.
Bucks in.
Yeah, you'd do that too. You're walking up and down the streets. And of course, they later sold soda water at those places, but when they used to be, they didn't do that at one time.
You could buy soda water for about 3 cents and then sell it for about 5.
Sold it for 5 cents. Yeah. Get a dime's worth of ice, see, that'll last you all day. And you made 50 cents that day, maybe. That wasn't bad. And there'd be 3 or 4 of them at one time on Main Street. But they'd come in, and some of them would bring their lunch with them. But that was payday.
Well, I was kind of surprised in checking up or learning about Elgin, but they had ice cream way back there in the teens, I guess it was. They had ice cream stores and candy stores.
Yeah, they had mix it they could buy. See, you could get it out of Austin. You couldn't get it here because they had to make 2 rounds. But they probably could get it from Bryant Creamery, buy the mix, and all you had to do is turn it, cool it. And we couldn't do that here because the trains didn't get in here until the afternoon of the day before, and they'd have to stay over in Elgin, so it wasn't possible. And they didn't ship a bus at that time, and they didn't have any trucks running. But more than likely, that's the reason y'all had commercial ice cream much before we did, frozen locally. Because that became available here later. And they began to ship it out of Houston. Well, they could leave Houston early in the morning, pack real good, and get here at 12 o'clock. Passenger trains used to, when we delivered the papers here for years, well, that was something we used to do, deliver the Galveston News. Brother had it, and then Hop had it, and then we had it. Dan and I. We had it when they were leaving at 12 o'clock, and then let us out of school. The trains got in here. The noon train came here at 12:30. And we could be out of school for 15 or 20 minutes after 1 to deliver the papers around town on a horse. He took one side of town, and I took the other side.
You delivered by
horse.
Oh, horseback.
Yeah, he had a horse and I had a horse. And we had it right at the place. We'd go down and get the papers. He'd take his part to that end, and I'd take mine up here, delivered right around this street right
here. It just took you how long? 30 minutes?
Well, a little bit over.
Yeah.
But I sort of say they'd let us get out of school. They missed the class 15 minutes because they'd get here a little before 12 if it was on time. And then, but we delivered papers. Hop had it before we did. Didn't have bicycles then either. You couldn't buy a bicycle. but we had horses, and I used to deliver this end up here.
Well, how did you throw the paper? It wasn't wrapped or anything?
No, we would fold them sometimes, and now they didn't like to fold them because you cracked it sometimes. But we'd throw it out. But like Mr. McClavey, who lived down close, he was a paralytic. He had a little Porsche on the side. Well, I could drive up there to my hut and almost hand it to him. If I'd get off, I could. But sometimes I don't know that we had saddles all the time. We had one horse with a saddle, maybe, but maybe not two. We'd ride
Well, you kind of enjoyed that, didn't you?
Yeah, it didn't take too long for us to do it either. But in the schools, the professors would let us do it because they thought we were rendering a service as well, to the people that wanted their papers. And Sunday we delivered in an automobile because it was a larger paper. There'd be one of us on each side there. And a lot of people took Sunday papers in, they didn't take daily papers.
You remember the barber shops used to have a bathtub?
Yeah, then you go down.
You go down and rent about 2 bits for a bath, I guess. They had hot water and towels. And
they had hot water that used kerosene to heat it with, before they had gas around.
And then on Sunday morning you had a big shaving business, I guess, the barber shops.
I think a lot of those would get them Saturday night or Saturday evening.
Yeah.
And they'd make it last 2 days. That's really the barber shops here stayed open at night, Saturday night.
Yeah.
But mostly, as I remember it, were for, well, maybe those people that were working that day, and they could come in there after they began to close up and all. I would think that that's about the way it was.
Well, now, in your dairy business, of course, you had a box.
We used it by hand.
Poured it by hand.
We filled by hand, capped it by hand, and everything.
And of course, you had a screen separator to separate
surplus we did, yeah. If we didn't have too much, we didn't run a separator, just skim it off the next day. It's all right if you used it that day, or the next day, the cream. But when you have a lot of milk in there with it, well, it will sour quicker than it will where it is if it's all cream. And then the cooling process is the thing too. The cooling process of cooling it right away, and then that takes the heat out quicker.
Well, how did you cool before refrigeration? Of course, you had ice boxes.
We used to buy ice and out where we milk. We would buy ice and had a sack to go around it, and then put it down in a container and try to cool it that way to get some of that heat out of it. It made it help. It made it work.
But your milk really wouldn't last much more than several hours out in the natural temperature.
Oh, it'll last more than that probably if you were in pretty good shape. But we tried to get it. If you could get it down some, it helped a whole lot, Jack.
Yeah.
And because you'd put it out, and they had boxes when they got home. In fact, we used to. If they were going to leave, they'd tell us to put it in the ice box.
Just go in the house and put it in the
They would
ice
tell
box.
us that. They would request that we do that.
Well, I guess we had, of course, Texas, with Texas Utilities, we had an ice plant there in Elgin.
Yeah. We had ice plants here a long time.
While you were a boy, you could go down and get ice any time.
Yeah, we bought that. We'd buy ice. They used to deliver it around town, on wagons. See, they here in Bastrop, they delivered ice early in the morning, started about daylight, and delivered around town, one going north and one south. And they had those where you stepped up on it and sawed it, chipped it, you used to, and then they started sawing it. And then they used that same team to haul coal from the railroad track to the ice house here. Now, y'all's might have been where they could dump it, unload it right at the yard. The gins and maybe the oil mill too, and the electricity too. That I don't know there, but here, with the electricity and the water outfit down here, they had to haul coal. So they hauled it. When they got through with the ice, they go over there and shoveled that coal out. And they had those wagons built with the wheels underneath them, more or less, Jack. Little wheels on the coal bunch thing, and the catching part was up high. And they had them fixed so that they could roll them up and let that stuff dump out like that on the side when they got down to the thing. to the,
Of course, you had your four of you boys in the family. Did your father ever give you a thrashing when you were?
well, mother did most of the thrashing.
What you
My mother
used?
did. I don't ever remember my daddy thrashing, but she did.
What you used, a switch or?
Switch, yeah, most of the time.
Or a razor strap or?
Well, maybe a razor strap too, but not much, mostly a switch.
Y'all weren't, you learned early that you weren't to
Well,
get
yeah,
under.
that was the line, and you stayed within the line.
What about at school? Did you ever get a thrashing at school?
Oh, yeah, we used to get thrashing to school, so especially from Mr. Mathis, you know, a little bit. When we'd get out of line, like running in the hallways or
Mathis.
Mathis, yeah, he used to be in Elgin.
Was he
From
Bastrop?
Yeah, friend
Fontaine.
Fontaine Raymond Mathis.
Yeah,
The
his
best
father was
school
a
man.
Methodist preacher up
As good a man, that's right, as good a man as ever walked in the Bastrop.
He was your
School.
superintendent.
Yeah,
wasn't he?
yeah, lived right over there. He was there with Hop and them, and he came when Hop was in school. Randall, that was in Elgin at one time, was there when Brother was in school here. Randall was here, and then Randall and Mathis changed places. You knew that.
Right.
Yeah. Randall's from out here at Cedar Creek. The Randalls were born and raised out there. And Brother stayed with the Randalls when he was up there, run a feed store there for Shin Grocery or whoever it was. He ran one in Elgin 2 or 3 years on the south side down there, in one of the Rivers building. And then he moved over to where Branton had his mule barn in that brick building.
Yeah.
Well, he was in that for a year or two. See, the Margaret McCullough and them used to, that was his sweetheart up there at that time. We've got a lot of pictures of her. Martha, and that was that was Tommy's sister.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but she and Brother were big friends. Brother lived with the Sanders over in that big 2-story house
Yeah.
when he first got up there. And that's when he was working for that.
T.B. Sanders.
Yeah, that's right. They're the same one.
Yeah.
Mrs. had to store it. But he liked Elgin very much, and I was up there, 5, 6 years with that speed store there.
Well, now, in your being right here on the river, I guess you were well acquainted with fishing on the river. And
Well, I wasn't. I wasn't crazy about waterfall swimming and all. I learned to swim in the creek like all of them did at that time. In fact, Mr. Elwood Moore used to tell me when he was growing up, and he would be over 100 now, when he was the old JP down here
oh, yeah.
at the thing, and he would be, 100? Oh, good, but that's where they used to go for park up there. They went to the creek, never did use the river, Jack. We used the creek a lot, but we used the river a lot too, but in his days, the river was out for kids swimming, and they all learned to swim in Piney Creek.
Well, now, there's a shallows down here right
Now,
in town here.
Yeah, see, this was later when they had the dam and all, but this was before the dams and
There wasn't any
no
quiet place.
pollution, no nothing else to get in the water in those days. No
Was
systems
it
anywhere.
dangerous or something?
Up there, you mean why they didn't use the river?
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. Well, that, and maybe it was treacherous in a way with the sand or something. But they went to the creeks where there were springs in that day. And there was fresher water, they had drinking water, and they had that, and that was the reason. Now, we used to swim, when I came along, the Elwood Moore, see, he was 30 years older than I was. And he talks about they'd go up this street here and play ball out there. And this Oregon boy from over here got killed up there. They'd eaten lunch, and he went back and said, well, let's play ball. So they went back to the horses were still, they probably disconnected somewhat, but they were still at the hack there. And he went up there and jumped on the hack, and when this horse kicked hit him in the head, and he died right there.
No.
And but he frightened him. See, the horse was standing up sleeping like they do. You know, they sleep standing up, most of them. And so he frightened him, and the horse jumped or something. The reflex, and killed him. But it was right up this street. He used to tell me. He would tell me all those old kind of things, and things like that, where they had their life. and then we had ours at different places. But we used the river quite a bit. But it was good fishing in those days, you know.
Well, it was even
Good boat.
good water. It wasn't.
Well, we got water out of the river.
Yeah.
When the river used to get up here, the city water used to come out of the river somewhere here, and it'd get muddy and they wouldn't put it in the system. Boy, we had the worst water you ever saw out of an old artesian well down here that had sulfur in it. And then it would take about 3 days to get the sulfur out of the system. But they used to get the water out of that before they had wells.
Well, now you say you didn't do a whole lot of fishing, camping
I
out.
didn't, but boy, it was family style, man. Like the Pfeiffers here, in the summertime, Pfeiffer lived back over here, and he had 4 or 5 girls and 3 boys. And he was a carpenter. He built a lot of these houses, especially with these round. You'll go down the street now, and he probably built all of them with those round porches on them.
Decorated.
That's right. But he was pretty good at that, a good man there. And but they'd go up on our old farm up here, which was part of the green estate that my grandmother got, and they'd stay out there for a month or so. Just move up there. Just stayed up there. They'd have them some tents, and they took a cow there, and right across the river was the Burleson Springs, and they would go there and get the water, fresh water, see. And they'd go up there after work. But the family was up there all the time, and the town enjoyed it because the boys and the girls would go up there too.
Visit up
They visit up there. It wasn't far to walk.
Yeah.
If you need to, or ride your horse or take a buggy there. You could just go on down through the field. But they did that every year. I've got some pictures of it. I'll have to break them out sometime.
What about
where the campsite was?
What about hunting? Did you do any hunting?
Well, hunting wasn't too much at that time.
You didn't go what we call possum hunting?
Me go hunting? Yeah, later on I did. Yeah, I went with my older brothers. He used to bring Martha Cunningham and Dorothy and Thomas Margaret McCullough and the Cunningham girl, Martha Cunningham, and a bunch of them out of Elgin. Thad Sanders was one with her. And they'd come down here and go possum hunting, plus the others that were up there. But it'd be 2 or 3 automobiles come down, and we'd always go out this way, and they went back over the high bridge back to Elgin. But they used to come up here all the time and we'd possum hunt out there.
Y'all had integrated possum hunts.
Yeah, I've got a lot of pictures of he and Margaret somewhere. Lots of them. They took a lot of pictures.
Now that's Dan.
I was Sid. No, my older brother.
Oh, Sid.
I'm an older brother, see, because it was 9 years old between. Was 6 years older between my brother and the oldest brother, and then 3 between Hop and I. So there was quite a bit of difference in the age, you see.
Well, now we were talking earlier about Saturday. What about Sunday? You still had blue laws, didn't you? Pretty much.
Yeah, then we'd go to Sunday school on Sunday, everybody.
And then you had the Epworth League or
they had a league after
program. Or?
Yeah. See, I was when we went to school at the old church over here when it was on Church Street. See, the church, that was the site of the church that they built when they organized the church in 35. It wasn't the same church, but later they tore that church down when we got a new one in 25 or 26 and moved it down into the Seguin country for a parsonage, for a church down there, Jack. That's what they did with all of them. There was a connection here of the Methodist church with the old academy, which was across the street from it. Dr. Luckett acquired some of the old academy when where his house is built. That's where the old academy site was, right at that spot, back off the road.
But now Sunday then, was that when you played baseball? Or was
Well, I played baseball on Sunday. But that time, that was when you had to have crowds. Because baseball, in the old days, it didn't cost much, but in the other days it did. You had to pay somebody to umpire. Came out of Austin, maybe. You won a fair one, and they paid the pitcher and catcher, and they'd pay some of the others expense anyhow. Depending on how much you contributed to the team. They could get by with 1 or 2 cheap ones, or get them free. Like Sellers and I used to play. John, the youngest one, what was his name? Well, Steve and Joe and John were the older ones. And the last one was it Harry Sellers? No. Well, anyhow, he and I played ball together. We used to.
Y'all paid pretty cheap, huh?
Well, yeah, that's right.
What was your position?
Yeah, I played in the outfield with Elgin mostly. Sometimes played infield if they were short-handed. They had good infields, Jack. Those older ball players played infield, you know, like Swede Lynn and Marty Carroll. Marty Carroll played with them up there. He played second base. Swede Lynn and who played first base? And Bastrop played with us.
So Wallace Arbuckle, he played.
Wallace caught for us.
Yeah.
He caught for Cloppin quite a while. Wallace is older than I was.
Sam Cup,
He was a pro too, but he was umpiring mostly at that time. He had quit playing baseball.
So I think Howard McGee was one.
Howard McGee played some too. Now he was a catcher, but he never did play with us. He was a little bit older, you see. Just died, didn't he? 90 years old, wasn't he?
Yeah.
90. Well, so he was a little bit older. He played with Otto Allen. See, Otto kind of had a second team. Those that were coming up and those boys off of the, I saw his old pitcher died the other day.
Who did?
Otto Allen's star pitcher.
Oh.
That just died. What was his name? Just this last week. I saw it where he died. He was a curveball pitcher and a good one. But he played with the Bakers. See, the Bakers played the same time Howland did some. But they were just another step down.
Now was Gallion, did Gallion have a...
Gallion Gin?
They had basketball, I don't know about that.
No, I didn't know any of the Gallion bunch. They were there before. And I think that with the Gallion, they moved in there, didn't they?
Yeah, they were there when I was growing up. They had a...
Johnny Gallion?
Johnny Gallion and Sonny Hankey was the brother-in-law to Johnny. His sister married Johnny. But they had I remember they had one baseball, or I guess it was basketball, Gallion Jenners.
Yeah, well, the other pitcher I was telling you about was Mark Snowden.
Mark who?
You should have remembered Mark Snowden.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Mark was a good little curveball pitcher.
Yeah.
You know, that ball that just got her up there just as slow as it could be, and then it'd break like that. But Mark played with Otto Allen's bunch mostly. But he was a pretty good pitcher for about 3 innings till you got used to him. You know, they finally found out they could step up 2 or 3 when it was slow pitch. It was a curveball, you'd step up in front of the plate and then hit it before it broke. So, but he was a good pitcher. I saw that in the thing. I played with him many a ball game at picnics and things, and with Howland.
Yeah.
And cause I'd go up and play with Otto quite a bit. Played with him, I guess, as much as it did Clopton, as far as that goes.
Well, now I guess they used to have a lot of traveling shows, medicine shows.
Oh, they were always a key thing every summer. Holland comedians used to have tent shows.
Well, what about, did they have an opera building here?
Yeah, the old opera house.
Yeah.
They used to bring chautauquas in here, is what my daddy used to call them. And when they were running those things from the depot, they hauled them up there and unloaded them down the back. And they would bring those show people with all their stages and everything and hauled them in those, you know, those cars were built that way so they could step into it.
And the old opera house
was a place where they had them.
Made with a stage and all that.
Yeah, they had it that way. And I hate to say it with this on, but anyhow, they made the mistake of taking a lot of that down. They used to have dressing rooms in the back, and they were built on because the bricks were there first. And they came along, instead of restoring it, they tore it all down, and now they wish they had it back. But when we took the opera house over and operated it, they were still there, and it was then you walk there, and the dressing rooms were right down the hall, just like this one. And they go in, and my daddy used to bring them up there, and from the depot.
And your daddy did the driving of the rig.
Well, sometimes he did.
Sometimes.
Sometimes he did, and sometimes he didn't, but that was part of the job. You see, the meeting the trains and rigging.
I remember Otto Frankie used to have a traveling tent for skating rink.
Oh, yeah?
I imagine you had...
You had those, that was Harv Holland's comedians. They used to have tent shows that came by every year. They'd come back and stay a week. they were kin to these Mennonite people out here in the country, Jack. The Hollands were that went here. And you had others too, but he made probably Elgin too, Hart Holland.
Now, did you have circuses and stuff?
Yeah, they'd come by once a year.
They weren't
come by
regular brothers, but they'd have a pretty good
There was
circus.
Barnum and Bailey. Barnum and Bailey circus that was coming here.
Yeah.
And they were there for a good many years. And they'd go to Elgin too.
They'd come in on the train?
Come in on the train, you got up that morning, went out and watched them unload. That was important, you know, and watch them put up the tents. And of course when they came along later, well they had, we had other things that went with it.
Did you ever water the elephants?
No, I never did. But they'd blow the water out on you. You know, those elephants like that. They'd catch people around there real close. You've seen them do that, haven't you?
I knew they could do it.
Oh, they would do it. They'd do it on purpose. They wasn't nobody's fools, you know. They were pretty smart outfit. But we'd go down to the depot and watch them unload the Shetland ponies. They had the parades, and we had to hold our horses around town. You know, a horse would go crazy when those elephants was coming around. Did you know that?
Well, I imagine
They would always say that the circus is in town, and they'd put up signs around. Beware of horses, driving horses to a buggy when the elephants were in town. And that was signs they used to put up around the places, if I remember that.
They used to give out passes to
Kids at work.
kids that
You know,
worked
put up
on.
seats and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we used to do that too. We'd always get up early in the morning and go down there. And they'd have those kind of things.
You ever remember any citywide revivals, church meetings? Did they have things like that?
They had them here, but I don't remember us going to them too much. They had pretty good church houses here. And of course the revivals were in the summertime. And brush arbor meetings.
Yeah.
Now, Dooleville used to talk about them out in the country churches. And they had them here. My grandmother used to tell me out at Colorado Chapel on the river. See, that was their big one. And then Mrs. Clave Templeton told me later, because they were in with it too. And it's really tragic that the Methodist Church, that those records got away from us, because that was a central meeting for Elgin, Bastrop, Alston, Moore's Landing, which is Haney's Chapel, and over on that side, and even Cedar Creek too, because they'd come up there and go down and go to the ferry right behind the church there.
Well, with Osborne Chapel, was that the same as Colorado Chapel?
Osborne Chapel, no, that was prior to that. Osborne Chapel was one of the first, according to what your mother's record.
Colorado Chapel, wasn't it right on the river?
It was right on the river. See, that's where the community was, because, see, this was when Bastrop, the road, that thing started about the time that they had Bastrop Alston Road. The first road in Bastrop laid out, road laid out north in Bastrop, north of Farm Street was, and the only one for a long, long time, was the Bastrop Alston Road north of the river.
Go ahead.
And it went from here went right straight up that street, Jack, and went here to where Buckstein's place is now.
Yep.
And they crossed Sandy Creek before they got there. And when they got the other side, they went around and crossed Wilbarger up at Coates's place. And then went on into Austin, see? Then over to Wells's and then on into Austin. Because I've got things here when Mr. Washington was up there. And in those days, the people living on the road worked the roads. You've seen that, haven't you? Mm-hmm. And Mr. Washington, his thing, and it's down at the museum right now, and where his territory was, and it's on record in the Bastrop Courthouse, but I never had time to work them up. From the corporation line, which was the bridge down here, that was the corporation of Bastrop, see, not the Bastrop Town Train. Corporation line to, he worked from there to Sandy Creek, say. No, he worked from there to Coates's place. To Sandy Creek's what it was. And then Coates took it from Sandy Creek up to his place. That's, I believe, what it was. See, now Sandy Creek is the one this side, was the Steiner place, a little bit. And Mr. Washington lived on the Steiner place. And then he took it to Coates, and then Coates would take it on up his country. Each one of them had a territory. You knew that, didn't you? Yeah, this was possible. And the sad part of that was that when I was at the courthouse, it wasn't too long ago, before Mr. Tigg left there, he had all those documents and kept them for all those years, and he had to throw them away because he didn't have any room. And now there's a few of them left, and that's what I'm getting mine off, because they furnished you with one, because that was working on the road. See, that was part of the process in those days. And they furnished, the county furnished the equipment, and you did it. Like drags.
The city's kind of a poll tax.
That's
road tax.
Well, it was something that they did. And they did it, and all the hands living on that road participated in it. And it listed all of them. And as it got more people, they didn't have to list so many. But those would be the ones that they put down and substitute other names for them. And now they are in a book somewhere that they took this out of to get the names from. See? But I never have had time to get back and look that up. But they were in the folders, and I've got some, and I've got some that Dunobel had when the McWrights were out there. Now they're in my possession. But it's an oddity that isn't anymore. And the others are down in the Washington file in the museum. I've read them and got copies of them. Old man Washington, Jack, that was there, came in here and married Wilkes, I guess. And I believe she was a Wilkes. And Wilkes had the hotel in Elgin, his sister. And he used to work for the railroad. And all of that's in there, and in that file. It's really interesting. I've got to show it to Mary Jane Davis. We're looking with a lot of that now. She's an older person, older than I am. He used to be tax collecting, and then her mother was tax collector, and Davis was sheriff too. George Davis was sheriff.
Well, I think maybe you've had enough to keep you busy here, and you probably need a little relaxation. We'll discontinue here and come back another day and get some more. I haven't got but about, I hadn't even got half through with what I was aiming at. So I hope, Clyde, thank you for your time, and we'll continue, to be continued would be the way to do it, I guess.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
And
is that it? I'll fix some coffee.
All right, let's
How's that?
That'll be fine. That's an offer I can't refuse.
Okay.